"Not often," answered the chair. "I once talked with Sir William Phipps, and communicated my ideas about the witchcraft delusion. Cotton Mather had several conversations with me, and derived great benefit from my historical reminiscences. In the days of the Stamp Act, I whispered in the ear of Hutchinson, bidding him to remember what stock his countrymen were descended of, and to think whether the spirit of their forefathers had utterly departed from them. The last man whom I favored with a colloquy, was that stout old Republican, Samuel Adams. And how happens it, inquired grandfather, that there is no record nor tradition of your conversational abilities? It is an uncommon thing to meet with a chair that can talk. Why, to tell you the truth, said the chair, giving itself a hitch nearer to the hearth, I am not apt to choose the most suitable moments for unclosing my lips. Sometimes I have inconsiderately begun to speak, when my occupant, lolling back in my arms, was inclined to take an after-dinner nap. Or, perhaps, the impulse to talk may be felt at midnight, when the lamp burns dim, and the fire crumbles into decay, and the studious or thoughtful man finds that his brain is in a mist. Oftenest, I have unwisely uttered my wisdom in the ears of sick persons, when the inquietude of fever made them toss about, upon my cushion. And so it happens, that, though my words make a pretty strong impression at the moment, yet my auditors invariably remember them only as a dream. I should not wonder if you, my excellent friend, were to do the same, tomorrow morning, nor I either, thought grandfather to himself. However, he thanked this respectable old chair for beginning the conversation, and begged to know whether it had anything particular to communicate. I have been listening attentively to your narrative of my adventures, replied the chair, and it must be owned, that your correctness entitles you to be held up as a pattern to biographers. Nevertheless, there are a few omissions, which I should be glad to see supplied. For instance, you make no mention of the good knight, Sir Richard Saltonstall, nor of the famous Hugh Peters, nor of those old regicide judges, Whalley, Goffey, and Dixwell. Yet I have borne the weight of all these distinguished characters. At one time or another, grandfather promised amendment, if ever he should have an opportunity to repeat his narrative. The good old chair, which still seemed to retain a due regard for outward appearance, then reminded him how long a time had passed, since it had been provided with a new cushion. It likewise expressed the opinion, that the oaken figures on its back would show to much better advantage, by the aid of a little varnish. And I have had a complaint in this joint, continued the chair, endeavouring to lift one of its legs, ever since Charlie trundled his wheelbarrow against me. It shall be attended to, said grandfather. And now, venerable chair, I have a favour to solicit. During an existence of more than 2 centuries, you have had a familiar intercourse with men who were esteemed the wisest of their day. Doubtless, with your capacious understanding, you have treasured up many an invaluable lesson of wisdom. You certainly have had time enough to guess the riddle of life. Tell us poor mortals, then, how we may be happy. The lion's head fixed its eyes thoughtfully upon the fire, and the whole chair assumed an aspect of deep meditation. Finally, it beckoned to grandfather with its elbow, and made a step sideways towards him, as if it had a very important secret to communicate. As long as I have stood in the midst of human affairs, said the chair, with a very oracular enunciation, I have constantly observed that justice, truth, and love, are the chief ingredients of every happy life. Justice, truth, and love, exclaimed grandfather. We need not exist 2 centuries to find out that these qualities are essential to our happiness. This is no secret. Every human being is born with the instinctive knowledge of it. Ah, cried the chair, drawing back in surprise. From what I have observed of the dealings of man with man, and nation with nation, I never should have suspected that they knew this all-important secret. And, with this eternal lesson written in your soul, do you ask me to sift new wisdom for you, out of my petty existence of 2 or 3 centuries? But, my dear chair, said grandfather. Not a word more, interrupted the chair, here I close my lips for the next 100 years. At the end of that period, if I shall have discovered any new precepts of happiness, better than what heaven has already taught you, they shall assuredly be given to the world. In the energy of its utterance, the oaken chair seemed to stamp its foot, and trod, we hope unintentionally, upon grandfather's toe. The old gentleman started, and found that he had been asleep in the great chair, and that his heavy walking stick had fallen down across his foot. "Grandfather," cried little Alice, clapping her hands, "you must dream a new dream, every night, about our chair." Lawrence, and Clara, and Charlie, said the same. But the good old gentleman shook his head, and declared that here ended the history, real or fabulous, of grandfather's chair.